50 Cent took the stand. The room went cold. What started as whispers turned into a list. Real names, real stories, all under oath. Usher, Bieber, Fabolous, Kevin Hart. But this isn't just about Diddy. It's about the system that protected him and the silence that cost everything. When court adjourned, 50 walked off. But what stared back from across the room wasn't just a man. It was something older. And at 3:33 a.m., it came knocking. I got there early, too early. The kind of early where even the hallways feel hollow. Yesterday's testimony from Monique had left a mark, not just on the courtroom, on me. Her voice still echoed somewhere in my head, software controlled, but full of something cold. I thought maybe today would feel lighter, like the worst was over. But the second I walked in, I knew it had only just begun. The gallery was still filling, but the tension, it was already seated. There was no chatter, just the sound of shoes on tile, paper shuffling, and that low hum, like the walls were vibrating. And then I saw him, Diddy, already in his chair, staring forward. He looked calm, but not relaxed. His hands didn't move. His eyes didn't blink. He looked like a man sitting in a room that was about to collapse. And somehow, he'd known this day was coming. Then it happened. He walked in, 50 Cent, not in designer, not in bravado, not in meme mode, just present, heavy, like he was carrying something the room wasn't ready to hold. No announcement, no camera flashes, just a silence so thick it pushed against your chest. He didn't look at anyone, not Diddy, not the jury. He walked straight to the stand like he'd been here before, but not as a witness, as a reckoning. He raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. And the moment he sat down, I felt the air change, not metaphorically, literally. It got colder. He didn't waste time, didn't play to the room. His first words? It's not just rumors. The gallery shifted. You could hear someone stop breathing in the second row. And then he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Not a prop, not a performance, a list. He held it in one hand and stared at it like it had been burning a hole in his chest for years. "This ain't no hit list," he said. "It's a truth list." That's when I saw it. Diddy's face. Still no blinking, no expression. But something changed. Not fear, not anger. Just blank, like a man watching a car crash he can't stop because he's the one who cut the brakes. And in that silence, the kind that lives between heartbeats, 50 Cent began to read. Name by name, story by story. And with each word, the courtroom got smaller. Like the walls were leaning in to listen. He looked down at the list in his hands and said the name everyone had been waiting for. Usher Raymond. The room didn't gasp. It held its breath. 50 didn't rush, didn't dramatize. He just said it, like a man repeating what he's known for years and is finally allowed to say out loud. He didn't say Usher was a victim. He didn't need to, because what he described next spoke louder than any accusation. Usher was just 14, he said. Puff was a grown man. They called it flavor camp. He paused there, let it sit, let it rot in our minds a little. We all knew about it, he said. We didn't understand it, but we knew. He referenced an old Howard Stern interview. Usher dancing around the truth like his shoes were on fire, laughing, joking, trying not to crack. That boy, 50 said, looked like he had something he wanted to say, but Puff got that power, makes people quiet. He talked about the way Usher and Diddy still interacted years later, from a distance, polite, but off. That wasn't the "we drifted apart" kind of energy, he said. That was the "you know what you did" kind of energy. The jury started shifting in their seats. And then he said something I'll never forget. This industry don't run on paper trails. It runs on what people whisper backstage and what we see when the cameras turn off. He hadn't even gotten to the second name yet. Next, Justin Bieber. This one hurt people. You could feel it in the room. 50 took his time. He mentioned the now infamous clip. Diddy on camera saying, "I don't have legal guardianship of him, but for the next 48 hours, he's with me." People used to laugh at that, but no one was laughing now. They made it sound like mentoring, 50 said. But ain't nobody mentoring a 15-year-old in Miami at 2 a.m. He said insiders had told him things they never dared to repeat publicly. Not because they didn't matter, but because they did. They called it exposure, he said. Exposure to things no teenage boy should see. He didn't go graphic. He didn't have to. He let the silence do the talking. Then he mentioned the distance, how Bieber pulled away, how his breakdown wasn't just about fame. It's about what fame let in, he said. Puff finds them young, gives them the world, then keeps them quiet, with guilt and gifts. You could tell the courtroom was processing it all differently now. The celebrity sheen was wearing off, and what was underneath was darker than anyone wanted to admit. He stopped for a second, looked out over the courtroom, not at Diddy, at all of us. Puff pressures people, he said. He don't ask. He insists. And once you're in, you don't leave the same. Then he said something that shook me more than any name on that list. I told young artists, don't take gifts, don't go to the house, don't stay late, and don't ever agree to the after party. That's when it gets dark. At this point, Diddy still hadn't moved. Still that same empty stare, like he wasn't hearing it, or like he'd heard it all before. But the gallery, silent, pale, processing. One juror had their hands clasped so tight their knuckles were white. And me? I sat there realizing this wasn't new. None of this was new. We just hadn't been ready to call it what it was. Because sometimes horror doesn't arrive with screams. It arrives with smiles, with money, with contracts. And sometimes it arrives holding a list. I thought hearing the names would be the hardest part, but I was wrong. Because once the list began, the real horror wasn't who was on it. It was who made sure no one ever spoke about it. 50 Cent didn't break down. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. But the room around him did. Not loudly, not dramatically, but subtly. The defense table went from calm to frantic. Paper started moving faster. Pens scribbled harder. Two of Diddy's lawyers whispered, shielding their mouths. It wasn't disbelief. It was logistics. They weren't asking, is this true? They were asking, how much did he just expose? Diddy still didn't move. But something in his body language changed. Not his face, his hands. Still folded, but tight now. White-knuckled. Like he wasn't holding composure. He was holding control. Barely. Then 50 started talking about NDAs. He explained how they weren't just about protection. They were about containment. Not just don't talk, but don't describe, don't recall, don't hint. Some were so strict they barred artists from ever speaking about unusual behavior at private events. Others included clauses forbidding any commentary on reputation, association, even tone. It wasn't about hiding lawsuits, he said. It was about hiding habits. I sat in the gallery, unmoving. I couldn't look away, but I couldn't do anything either. No phone, no watch, no notes, just memory and fear. Because I'd heard about this before, not in courtrooms, in whispers, in Elena Vargas's archive, in Monique's email chains, buried under layers of PR edits and strategic silence. This wasn't about protecting a man, it was about protecting a machine, a system, the kind that makes monsters look charming, the kind that lets trauma get rebranded as a bad experience, the kind that hands out NDAs like wristbands at a music festival. 50's voice stayed even, but his message got sharper. He talked about artists who disappeared, not because they failed, but because they stopped cooperating. They weren't burned out, They were burned away. He listed names who tried to speak. Jean Deal, Monique, Cassie, and every single one of them was painted with the same brush: erratic, jealous, angry, unstable, not by accident, by design. That's how they do it, he said. They don't silence you by gagging you. They silence you by discrediting you. My mind flashed to something I hadn't thought about in years. A panel at a songwriters convention, 2012 maybe. A woman stood up during a Q&A, Veronique L. backup singer, soft-spoken. She started to say something about private recording trips that didn't feel safe. Didn't get more than 2 sentences out before she was gently but firmly cut off. Back then I thought, maybe she broke protocol. Maybe she wasn't supposed to talk shop. Now I know exactly what she was trying to say. 50 brought her up too, not by accident. Veronique tried to speak, he said. They pulled her off a mic before she ever said the name. I sat still. No phone to fact check, no camera to review. Just a memory. That finally made sense. It wasn't just Veronique, it was dozens, maybe more. People who got reassigned, blacklisted, sent to rest, moved off label, silently dropped. Not for crimes, for knowledge. I thought about Monique's files, the ones Elena sent before she vanished. PR firm trails, legal memos, names that appeared in both Bad Boy and Lionsgate's media contracts, shared email signatures, shared narratives. I remembered seeing a thread titled Cassie and Monique Containment. I didn't understand it back then, but I do now. This wasn't about spinning the story. This was about owning the narrative before it even happened. A celebrity didn't just have a meltdown, they were scripted to. Back in the courtroom, the energy had shifted. Jurors leaned forward now, not in curiosity, in disbelief. Not because they didn't believe what 50 was saying, because they did, and it changed everything. He said something then that landed hard. Most people think this stuff gets covered up with hush money, but money's just the start. What really shuts you down is reputation control. The narrative becomes the cage. Diddy's lawyers scribbled again. Someone near the back coughed, but didn't finish the breath. Even the court clerk looked paler than before. And me? I realized something awful. This wasn't about individual events. This was about a structure, a model, an entire ecosystem of silence. And that list 50 was reading, that was the virus that could take the whole system down. He ended the segment without theatrics, folded the list again, tucked it back inside his jacket like a loaded weapon. I ain't even halfway through, he said, but I'll stop here, for now. Silence. Heavy, not respectful, haunted, because we all knew what we'd just heard. This trial wasn't about headlines anymore. It wasn't about gossip, or tabloid stories, or social media theories. It was about infrastructure. And when 50 Cent pulled back the curtain, what we saw behind it wasn't just a man. It was a machine built to protect him. And it's still running. He stayed calm. That's what made it worse. Because by now, 50 wasn't just naming names. He was rewinding the world. Every story he told, we'd already seen. We just didn't know what we were watching. Let's talk about Fabolous. The courtroom shifted again. 50 brought up the Drink Champs interview. You've seen the clip. Diddy leaning in, grinning. Why we never partied together? The room laughed. Fabolous didn't. I was there, 50 said. Off camera. Fab didn't want to be. That man folded into himself. That wasn't shyness. That was a man figuring out how to escape without making it worse. He described a different night. Private event. Backroom crowd. Diddy leaned in again. Come upstairs, just chill. It's nothing. Fab dipped out the back door. Didn't wait, didn't say goodbye, didn't come back. That wasn't a social exit, 50 told the court. That was a flight response. Then he moved on. Next name, Kevin Hart. Another pause. Another room holding its breath. There's a clip, a live stream, Puff's talking. says me and Usher used to wake up together, then laughs, says, "No homo." The courtroom didn't laugh. "Kevin," 50 continued, "he ain't laugh either. He fake smiled, looked around like he wanted to disappear, changed the subject, fast. He leaned into the mic, but his voice stayed low. That wasn't comedy, that was a reflex. That's the face you make when someone you know too well starts saying the thing you hoped they never would." Then came a name I didn't expect him to say again. Justin Bieber. The room tightened. 50 talked about the clip. "You know the one. Diddy smiling on camera. I don't have guardianship, but he's with me for the next 48 hours. We laughed when we first saw it. Laughed at the way Diddy said it. Laughed because what else could we do? But now, 50's voice turned colder. He was 15. Puff was everywhere back then, and wherever he went, Justin showed up. Then he didn't. He said insiders told him the stories. Never official, never on paper. Just the kind of whispers you hear from people who don't sleep well anymore. That 48 hours wasn't studio time, wasn't artist development, it was exposure. He didn't say what happened, he didn't have to. Let's move on. He said it like a surgeon. Clean, detached. Osiris. 50 barely had to explain. Everyone in the room already knew the story. Young, viral, gifted, and then Jamaica. Instagram photos, expensive clothes, fake smiles. He was with Puff that week, 50 said. Tried to act like it was business, said he brought his girl. But the body language told another story. So did the timeline. A week later, Osiris went live. No jewelry, no filters, just tears. That boy cracked open on camera, 50 said, and nobody asked why. At this point, the room was no longer shocked. It was sick. The jurors looked pale. The reporters had stopped writing. Even Diddy's team had stopped whispering. Because the scariest part, we'd all seen this before. We just didn't want to know. 50 folded the paper in his hand, didn't close it, just folded it like he was keeping the truth from spilling out too fast. Some names on this list, they were victims. Some helped him, and some still don't know which one they were. He stared ahead, not at Diddy, not at the jury, just past us, like the names were still playing in his mind. Fear keeps him close. Silence keeps him paid. He paused, then said something I'll never forget. You want to know what real control looks like? It ain't threats, it's favors. The judge called for a recess, but no one moved, because in that moment, the game changed again. This wasn't just about rooms without phones or contracts with silence clauses. This was about what happens when the people we watch on stage are really just survivors of a story no one ever let them tell. He finished. No grand ending, no mic drop, just the list, folded again, slipped into his inner pocket like a closed wound. And then he stepped down from the witness stand. The room didn't breathe. He walked past the gallery, slow, controlled, like a man walking away from an explosion he already knew was coming. And that's when it happened. Diddy looked up, for the first time that day, and 50 looked back. No words, no expression, just eyes. It was like the air shifted, the lights dimmed, the wood in the walls cracked under pressure. A stillness fell across the courtroom like a blackout. No judge, no jury, no audience, just the two of them. One in all black, one in all white. And for a moment, it felt like I wasn't watching two men. I was watching something older, like a battle that had already been fought and never resolved. Light and dark, truth and power, witness and architect. Then the judge's gavel cracked the silence. Court is adjourned for today. And the spell broke. People stood like waking from a trance, shuffling papers, moving too quickly. Anything to fill the silence that had just caved in. But not me. I stayed seated for a moment longer, because as the room began to clear, he looked at me. Diddy. Just for a second, but long enough. No smile, no sneer, just stillness. Like he knew I was watching, like he always had been. And then he turned and was gone. I didn't speak to anyone on the way out. Didn't look at the press, didn't check my phone. I just went home. Sat on the couch. My head was full, but my body was empty. Like all day, I'd been holding someone else's secrets inside my skin. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up, 3:33 a.m. Again. It's always 3:33. This time, not a phone call, not a message, not a feeling, a knock, 4 soft taps. I didn't want to answer. I told myself I'd ignore it. But I was already standing, already walking to the door. The hallway light was flickering, the kind of flicker you feel in your teeth. I opened the door, and there he was, Diddy, standing in the hallway, still, smiling, wearing a white suit, bright, crisp, wrong. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He just took one slow step forward, closer, and kept smiling. I couldn't move, not from fear, from recognition, because I understood now. This wasn't about court. It wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about presence. He wasn't just powerful, he was permitted. And that permission ran deeper than law. Another step, no words, just that grin. Like he knew the ending of a story I'd only just begun to read.